universe, they all exist. So, because he doesn't understand how the soul transmigrates or evolves through these species of life, he therefore thinks that by the natural selection or by the need of the particular body, the body evolves into a more and more advanced species. So this is the atheistic philosophy of how evolution takes place, but not according to the secondary creator, Lord Brahma. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who burns up to their roots all fruitive activities of those who are imbued with devotion, and impartially ordains for each the due enjoyment of the fruits of one's activities, of all those who walk in the path of work, in accordance with the chain of their previously performed works, no less in the case of the tiny insect that bears the name of Indragopa than in that of Indra, king of the Devas. This is the translation to Brahma Samhita 554. Continuing on the purport of verse number 21, even when someone kills someone else, it is to be understood that the person who was killed met the fruitive results of his own work, and that the man who killed him acted as the agent of material nature. Thus Kams begged Devaki's pardon by analyzing the matter deeply. He was not the cause of the death of Devaki's sons. Rather, this was their own destiny. Under the circumstances, Devaki should excuse Kamsa and forget his past deeds without lamentation. Kamsa admitted his own fault, but whatever he had done was under the control of providence. Kamsa might have been the immediate cause for the death of Devaki's sons, but the remote cause was their past deeds. This was an actual fact, Srila Prabhupada says. So this is another form of demoniac philosophy, when they don't take responsibility for their activities and they blame it on providence. Kamsa had willfully decided to kill the children of Devaki in order to save his own life, because he had believed in the voice coming from the sky at the time of the marriage of Devaki. But now he's more or less blaming it on providence itself, that he was simply the instrument of providence to kill these little children. So later, in the 85th chapter of the 10th canto, Sukadeva Goswami, he describes how Krishna went to retrieve the 6 sons of Devaki. And he explains there that because of laughing at Lord Brahma, because Brahma was chasing after his daughter, the 6 sons of Marichi, they were the grandsons of Brahma, immediately entered a demoniac form of life, and thus they took birth as sons of Hiranyakashipu. The goddess Yogamaya that took them away from Hiranyakashipu, and they were born again from Devaki's womb. After this, Kamsa murdered them. Devaki still laments for them, thinking of them as her sons. So these 6 sons of Marichi originally, because they insulted and disrespected Lord Brahma, they were forced to take birth in a demoniac birth as the sons of Kalanimi, who's in the same family as Hiranyakashipu. And when they voluntarily took shelter of Lord Brahma and performed tapasya, just as Hiranyakashipu had tried to do, to become immortal, Hiranyakashipu cursed them, because you left my shelter, you will be killed by your own father and your next father? By your own uncle, because the uncle is considered just like the father to the children. If the uncle doesn't have any sons, then those children of his sister will get his inheritance, so they're considered like the father. So therefore, Yogamaya arranged that these 6 sons would take birth from Devaki's womb and be killed by Kalanimi in the form of Kamsa. So although Kamsa didn't understand all of these details, he did understand the philosophy that nothing happens without the will of providence. He wouldn't go so far to say without the will of the Supreme Lord, but he did believe in providence. People misunderstand that with the end of the body, the self dies, or they think that one can kill another living entity. All these misconceptions oblige one to accept the conditions of material existence. In other words, as long as one is not firmly convinced of the eternality of the soul, one is subjected to the tribulation of being killer and killed. The demons, the asuras. So when we see that a person has demoniac mentality, we have to be very cautious. Now these demoniac qualities have different names in modern science. Psychopath, sociopath, psychosis, narcissistic. They give so many different names. But ultimately, we have to look and see what Krishna says, because he's the creator. And he says that from the beginning of the creation, there are 2 types of living entities. And Kamsa by nature was demoniac.
By the grace of the Lord, Kamsa felt sincere regret for having unnecessarily persecuted such Vaishnavas as Devaki and Vasudeva. And thus he came to the transcendental stage of knowledge. Because I am situated on the platform of knowledge, Kamsa said, understanding that I am not at all the killer of your sons, I have no responsibility for their death. As long as I thought that I would be killed by your son, I was in ignorance. But now I am free from this ignorance, which was due to a bodily conception of life. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.4.22 purport.
So yes, he has some knowledge. He's come to this he's come to this transcendental stage of knowledge, understanding that I am not at all the killer of your sons. So this is also a demoniac mentality. And this is the way the demon, he feels he can do anything at all, and he's not actually the doer. It's a complete warping of the real philosophy. Yes, we're not the doer, but we're not the doer when we act on behalf of the Supreme Lord. It doesn't mean that we can do anything, any type of sinful activity, and still we're not the doer. And therefore, Krishna was compelled to kill Kamsa for all of his atrocities. So now he's feeling remorse that unnecessarily he had persecuted Devaki and Vasudeva. He had unnecessarily killed all these children, but actually he's not to blame. So this is what he considers knowledge to be.
As stated in Bhagavad Gita 18.17, Yasya naham kruto bhavo buddhir yasya na lipyate hatva pi sa imam lokan na hanti na nibadhyate. One who is not motivated by false ego, whose intelligence is not entangled, though he kills men in this world, does not kill, nor is he bound by his actions. According to this axiomatic truth, Kamsa pleaded that he was not responsible for having killed the sons of Devaki and Vasudeva. Please try to excuse me for such false external activities, he said, and be pacified with the same knowledge. 10.4.22 purport. Anyone who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of Super Soul or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though killing, does not kill, nor is he ever affected by the reaction of such killing. When a soldier kills under the command of a superior officer, he is not subject to be judged. But if a soldier kills on his own personal account, then he is certainly judged by a court of law. Bhagavad Gita 18.17 purport.
So this particular sloka in the Bhagavad Gita has been misused by many demons in the past. One that perhaps most of us are familiar with was when one great demon in the previous century, he started the Aryan philosophy. His name was Hitler, and he derived his demoniac philosophy from the Bhagavad Gita. And here, because it says that in the Bhagavad Gita, that though he kills men in this world, does not kill, nor is he bound to his actions. But if we just read it like that, we believe that we can kill anyone, if they're not Aryan or whatever his bogus philosophy was, demoniac philosophy was. Because he committed genocide of anyone who he considered not to be an Aryan. He wanted to wipe them off of the planet. That's why we need the purports of Srila Prabhupada, because Prabhupada, he clarifies what does this mean, nor is he bound by his actions. Anyone who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the Supreme Lord, even though killing does not kill. So first we have to get the order. Just like a soldier, when he's ordered to kill, he's not held responsible. In fact, they give him a medal. But if he kills on his own, then he gets put in jail. So whatever we do, even if it's not in such a grave activity as killing, first it has to be approved and ordained by the Supreme Lord. Super Soul in our case is the external manifestation of Super Soul, the Guru. Otherwise, we must suffer the consequences of our activities.
Gandhi didn't see this first.
While Kamsa was speaking to his brother-in-law and sister, tears flowed from his eyes, and he fell down at their feet, believing the words of Durga Devi, whom he had tried to kill. Kamsa immediately released his brother-in-law and sister. He personally unlocked the iron shackles and very sympathetically showed his friendship, just like a family member. Krishna Book, Chapter 4. Kamsa begged, "My dear sister and brother-in-law, please be merciful to such poor-hearted person as me. Since both of you are saintly persons, please excuse my atrocities." Having said this, Kamsa fell at the feet of Vasudeva and Devaki, his eyes full of tears of regret. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.4.23.
So, this particular demon, fortunately, he had respect for Durga Devi. So when he was chastised, he sincerely regretted that he had angered her and that she chastised him so badly. So then he apologized to Vasudeva and Devaki. But other types of persons who don't understand about demigods, who are the servants of the Lord, and who claim that they themselves are God, there's no way to get them to have any remorse for their activities. The impersonalists who come to the conclusion that after liberation they themselves become God, they can do anything, and they don't understand that without the permission of the Supreme Lord Himself, they also have to suffer the consequences. That's why nowadays you have so many false incarnations, so-called God men, who feel that they can take full advantage any way they want and won't have to suffer consequences. But the Supreme Lord eventually catches up with them, and you'll find a lot of God men languishing in jail for all of their sinful activities.
Although Kamsa had spoken very nicely on the subject of real knowledge, his past deeds were abominable and atrocious, and therefore he further begged forgiveness from his sister and brother-in-law by falling at their feet and admitting that he was a most sinful person. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.4.23 purport. Fully believing in the words of goddess Durga, Kamsa exhibited his familial affection for Devaki and Vasudeva by immediately releasing them from their iron shackles. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:4-24.
This is just a temporary display of repentance. It won't last for long because of the demoniac mentality of Kamsa. And we can learn from this. We always have to remain in the association of devotees because we can never trust anyone with demoniac mentality. Now, fortunately, because Kamsa, he was very, very powerful, that means he had respect for the demigods. And the demigods, particularly Durga Devi, they awarded him so many different opulences for his worship. So that is why the Vedas are very important, because people with material desires, they're directed to worship different demigods to get those desires. And eventually those demigods bring them to this stage of knowledge, that they're not the doers, and ultimately there's supreme authority who's sanctioning everything. Now Kamsa couldn't come to the level of understanding the Supreme Lord, but at least he understood the Supreme Lord's energy, and that's a beginning, at least subordination to some higher authority.
When Devaki saw her brother so repentant, she also became pacified and forgot all his atrocious activities against her children. Vasudeva also, forgetting all past incidents, spoke smilingly with his brother-in-law. Krishna Book Chapter 4. When Devaki saw her brother actually repentant while explaining ordained events, she was relieved of all anger. Similarly, Vasudeva was also free from anger. Smiling, he spoke to Kamsa as follows. 10:4-25. It is said that the beauty of a tapasvi or saintly person is forgiveness. Actually, the real feature of devotees who undergo tapasya, austerity, is forgiveness. A true Vaishnava will readily forgive, and then so will Krishna.
These are different statements said by Srila Prabhupada about forgiveness throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he also mentions at this time that devotees don't become angry. So it says here that when Devaki heard how her brother was actually repentant, she was relieved of all anger, because anger also contaminates our mind. But there's a spiritual way that we can apply anger, and that is anger against the demons. So sometimes Srila Prabhupada will become angry, even in public events. When someone would challenge him, as demons often do, he would show his anger. And materialists wouldn't understand that. They falsely believe that saints should never become angry. But if someone is a demon, demoniac mentality, and if someone is disrespectful to the Supreme Lord, it's our duty to become angry. And it's also our duty to fight. That's why Krishna instilled in Arjuna that determination that he had to fight. And Srila Prabhupada also, within the Krishna consciousness movement, he was always ready to fight. Because as soon as we try to propagate Dharma or Krishna consciousness, the demons become agitated. So we must always expect that there's going to be disturbance from the demons, and we must be prepared not to run away, not to falsely forgive them when they offend the devotees, but to become angry and to fight them, but not with guns and swords, but with philosophy. And then we can defeat them. So we have coming up an example.
That evening, King Rajan Narasimha and Sri Rupa Narayan saw Durga Devi in a dream, she told them, "If you don't accept the shelter of Narottam's lotus feet, I will cut you all to pieces with my sharpened sword." The following morning, Raj Narasimha and Rupa Narayan arrived at the place of Narottam Thakur. Raj Narasimha and Rupa Narayan were overwhelmed at Narottama's polite and gentle Vaishnava behavior and fell prostrate at his lotus feet, begging forgiveness for their offences. At length, upon hearing the warning that Durga Devi had given them, Narottam smiled very sweetly. Thereafter, within a few days, he initiated them in the Radha Krishna mantra.
This is a contemporary example of what happened at the time of Narottam Das Thakur. Because he was of a Kayasta family, his father was a king, more or less a great zamindar in charge of a kingdom. Still, Narottam Das Thakur, because he was a pure Vaishnava, he was initiating even people in the Brahmin Varna. So the Smarta Brahmanas were very upset by this. And it was the Smarta Brahmanas who went to King Raja Nrsimha and asked him to please chastise and stop Narottam Das Thakur from initiating Brahmins, because he's ruining the entire Hindu culture this way, he himself being a Sudra. So they hatched up a plan that a great Pandit named Sri Rupa Narayan would go and philosophically debate with Narottam Das Thakur. And Narottam Das Thakur's disciples heard about this, and they hatched a better plan. They took the forms of a potter, someone who sells clay pots, and someone who sells betel leaves. And they were discussing in perfect Sanskrit the philosophy when Rupa Narayan and Raj Nrsimha, when the followers of these two came. And they completely defeated even the disciples of Rupa Narayan. So Rupa Narayan didn't dare to go to Narottam Das Thakur, because they were thinking, if a potter and a betel leaf seller in the marketplace who are disciples of Narottam Das Thakur are so highly educated, then we don't stand a chance against their guru. So they ran away. And that night, Durga Devi appeared to them, both of them, in the same dream, threatening them that they had to surrender to Narottam Das Thakur, which they did. So Durga Devi, she's active even in present time. If we deserve chastisement, she's always there to help in the Supreme Lord's activities.
It was her mercy that she told them to surrender to Vaishnava.
Sure.
Devaki and Vasudeva, both highly elevated personalities, accepted the truth presented by Kamsa that everything is ordained by providence. According to the prophecy, Kamsa would be killed by the 8th child of Devaki. Therefore, Vasudeva and Devaki saw that behind all these incidents was a great plan devised by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because the Lord had already taken birth, just like a human child, and was in the safe custody of Yashoda, everything was happening according to the plan, and there was no need to continue their ill feeling toward Kamsa. Thus they accepted Kamsa's votes. 10.4.25 purport.
So the demons, they may make so many plans to protect themselves and to enjoy life. But Krishna, he has his plans, and he has his devotees. So Devaki and Vasudeva, although it appeared that they suffered terribly because of the atrocities of Kamsa, actually they were peaceful, because they saw that the Lord had his plan and everything was going on exactly according to his plan. He wanted to go enjoy with Mother Yasoda and Nanda Maharaj and his devotees in Braj for 11 years. And then, when the time was ripe, he would come, and just as the voice said, he would come and kill that sinful Kamsa.
Vasudeva told Kamsa, "My dear fortunate brother-in-law, what you are saying about the material body and the soul is correct. Every living entity is born ignorant, understanding this material body to be the self, to be his self. This conception of life is due to ignorance, and on the basis of this ignorance we create enmity or friendship, lamentation, jubilation, fearfulness, envy, greed, illusion and madness are different features of our material concept of life. A person influenced like this engages in enmity due only to the material body. Being engaged in such activities, forget our eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of God." Krishna book, chapter 4.
Now just because the demigods have demigod bodies, it doesn't mean that they're eternally like that. Because they also can go up and down. They can become an Indragopa. They can be, any living entity can become an Indra or an Indragopa, depending upon his fruitive activities and the order of the Lord. So sometimes the demigods, who are very responsible devotees, administrative devotees, they very much like their material opulences. And the demons are envious and they want those material opulences without having to perform the pious activities that it takes to receive them. So there's constant fighting going on between the demigods and the demons. The demigods are trying to protect what they have, and the demons are trying to take what the demigods have. So this is all within the material realm. It has nothing to do with devotion. It's simply, this is mine and that's yours. But the demigods, the difference between the demigods and the demons is, when the demigods are in distress, they surrender to the Supreme Lord. And the demons, they'll never surrender under the Supreme Lord. They'll continue to fight until they get what they want. So Vasudeva, he was very proud, that, very happy that Kamsa had realized that he's not material body, that he's not these activities, all of these things. But he also understood that Kamsa by nature was a demon. So for the time being, Kamsa was understanding these things, but Vasudeva actually did not trust Kamsa.
O great personality Kamsa, only by the influence of ignorance does one accept the material body and bodily ego. What you have said about this philosophy is correct. Persons in the bodily concept of life, lacking self-realization, differentiate in terms of this is mine and this belongs to another. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:4-26.
And that is theirs. That everything belongs to Krishna, and whatever Krishna has given me, it's still Krishna's, and I'm using it in his service.
Everything is done automatically by the laws of nature, which work under the direction of Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no question of doing anything independently. For one who has put himself in this material atmosphere is fully under control of nature's laws. Our main business, therefore, should be to get out of this conditioned life and again become situated in spiritual existence. Only due to ignorance does a person think, I am a demigod, I am a human being, I am a dog, I am a cat, or when the ignorance is still further advanced, I am God. Unless one is fully self-realized, one's life of ignorance will continue. 10:4-26 purport.
So another meaning of gunas, guna also means ropes. We're tightly bound in this material world. And whatever we do is being directed by these three modes of material nature until we take shelter of the Supreme Lord. Once we've taken shelter of him, then he frees us from the stringent control of these three modes of material nature, and we come to the platform of Vishuddha-sattva, pure goodness. Even in the mode of goodness, we're conditioned, we're bound up, because by our knowledge, we have a sense of happiness, and therefore we don't aspire liberation from this material world. So until we come to the point of pure devotion to Krishna, we're still being controlled by these three modes of material nature, and we still identify with the particular bodies that material nature has given us. Therefore we have to take full shelter of Krishna.
What is this picture like? One person is digging the ground, other person is supervising, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mode of ignorance, mode of passion.
Okay.
All being
They're
controlled.
controlling the people, but they're
Yes.
doing their routine work, right?
That's right.
Okay. Because I was wondering on this comes in that
You never
front
understood
page.
it before?
Yeah, I understood,
Oh.
but I didn't understand what people are doing, like exactly what they are doing.
Oh.
I understood they're controlled by modes, but what exactly they are doing, like digging ground, and other is controlling, trying to tell him something to do or something.
Well, you see the strings,
Yeah.
the boss who's giving the directions, mostly is being controlled by the mode of goodness.
And
And
passion.
then the worker, mostly passion and ignorance.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Next. Persons with vision of differentiation are imbued with the material qualities of lamentation, jubilation, fear, envy, greed, illusion and madness. They are influenced by the immediate cause, which they are busy counteracting, because they have no knowledge of the remote supreme cause, the supreme personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:4-27.
This is why Krishna is called Ishvaraha Paramaha Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. So when we understand that Govinda or Krishna is the cause of all causes, we don't have to search for different types of remote causes, such as, well, it happened because of this, because of that, it was his fault, it was my fault, it should have been like this, it should have been like that. No, everything is happening directly by the Supreme Lord's will. And when we can see that, then we become completely free of all of these material qualities, beginning with lamentation, ending with madness. Because when we see the Supreme Lord in everything, then we become completely peaceful. And we trust the Supreme Lord. We know that everything He is doing is for our benefit so that we can come closer to Him. And then there's no more fear and anxiety in our life. We simply have faith that whatever happens in my life, Krishna is directly controlling so that He can bring me closer to Him.
Krishna is the cause of all causes, Sarva Karana Karam, Brahma Samhita 5.1. But one who has no connection with Krishna is disturbed by immediate causes and cannot restrain his vision of separation or differences. When an expert physician treats a patient, he tries to find the original cause of the disease and is not diverted by the symptoms of that original cause. Similarly, a devotee is never disturbed by reverses in life. Tattenukampam susamikshamanaha. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:14-8. A devotee understands that when he is in distress, this is due to his own past misdeeds, which are now accruing reactions, although by the grace of Supreme Personality of Godhead, these are only very slight. Karmani niradahati kintu cha bhakti bhajam. Brahma Samhita 5.54. This is 10.4.27 purport.
So the first quotation that Prabhupada gave, well, the first one we just discussed, Sarva Karana Karanam. The second, spoken by Lord Brahma also, in the 14th chapter, after Krishna deluded him in the Brahma Vimohan Lila, and he's offering prayers. We'll hear what the translation is on the next slide. And then the third one, Karmani Niyadati, that one we just heard, that by performing bhakti, all of the fruits of our karma can be burnt up by the Supreme Lord's will, by Govinda's will.
Yeah. So it's Madhvacharya explaining from Bhavishya Puran, Bhagavad Darshanad Yasya. Bhagavad Darshan means God's vision. Yasya, whose Virodhat Darshanam Pruthak, one whose vision is opposed to God's vision, he is considered Pruthak Drishti, means separatist. Like Pruthak Drishti is one whose vision is separate from God's vision. But not the one, Natu Sadbheda Darshana. Sadbheda means true difference, true quantitative difference between God and living entity. One who sees that, he is not considered separatist, his vision is correct. But the one whose vision is opposed to God's vision, like the proper vision, then he is considered separatist. That's the
So that's
meaning.
the Dvaitavad.
Yes, that is
Yes.
Advaita. Vasudeva took the opportunity of Kamsa's benevolence and informed him that his atheistic activities were also due to his misconception of life, namely taking the material body to the self. When Vasudeva talked with Kamsa in such an illuminating way, Kamsa became very pleased and his guilt for killing his nephews subdued. With the permission of his sister Devaki and brother-in-law Vasudeva, he returned to his home with a relieved mind. Krishna Book, Chapter 4. Shukdev Goswami continued, thus having been addressed in purity by Devaki and Vasudeva, who were very much appeased, Kamsa felt pleased, and with their permission he entered his home. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.4.28.
Now, was Kamsa the Chankazi in Chaitanya Lila? Yes. So, even Kamsa, by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, became a great devotee in his next life. So, one time, there's a wonderful devotee who lives in our community here. His name is Bibhishan Das. He's from Israel. And he comes every day for Mangal Arti, except for during lockdown. And I was asking him, what were you before you became a devotee? And he said to me, oh, I was a big demon. So actually, most of us were big demons before we became devotees. And what's the difference between a devotee and a demon? We don't know about the Supreme Lord. And until we meet a devotee who mercifully gives us knowledge, just as Vasudeva is speaking here to Kamsa, such a big demon, Kamsa became pacified. He actually became peaceful for the first time in so many years. And he took permission for them to go home. So even a great demon, if you give them proper knowledge, they can become pacified. And eventually, because he was killed by the Supreme Lord, in the next time around, in the Chaitanya Lila, he did become a great devotee, the Chankazi, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he even went to his house and preached to him for a whole evening.
But the next day, Kamsa called all his counselors together and narrated to them all the incidents that had happened in the night before. All the counselors of Kamsa were demons and eternal enemies of demigods, so they became depressed upon hearing their master speak of night's events. Krishna Book, Chapter 4. After that night passed, Kamsa summoned his ministers and informed them of all that had been spoken by Yogamaya, who had revealed that he who was to slay Kamsa had already been born somewhere else. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.4.29.
So there's an external vision of these ministers or demons, and then there's the internal vision. So later on, as we move on in the Krishna book, we'll hear about each one of these ministers or demons, because Kamsa one by one sent them to be killed by Krishna in Braj. But in other parts of the Shastras, we'll learn that many of these so-called demons were actually devotees in their previous life, and they had to suffer for some particular misdeed that they committed, and then by the grace of the Lord they were liberated when Krishna or Balaram killed them. So now Kamsa, he's finally peaceful, and he wanted to tell all of his ministers about what had transpired the night before. But his ministers, they weren't there. They didn't see Durga Devi. They were only concerned that, what are you saying? How can you take the side of Vasudeva and Devaki? These are our sworn enemies. We already know from Narada Muni that all the demigods are taking birth within the Yadu dynasty. And we have to perform worse atrocities, because if the demigods become superior to us, then our sense gratification will be reduced. So they had to keep Kamsa very strong in his demoniac mentality so that they would remain strong. So therefore they started to preach to Kamsa.
The Vedic scripture Chandi describes Maya, the energy of the Supreme Lord, as Nidra. Durga Devi Sarvabhuteshu Nidra Rupena Samasthitaha. The energy of Yogamaya and Mahamaya keeps the living entities sleeping in this material world in the great darkness of ignorance. Yogamaya, the goddess Durga, kept Kamsa in darkness about Krishna's birth and misled him to believe that his enemy Krishna had been born elsewhere. Krishna was born the son of Devaki, but according to Lord's original plan, as prophesied to Brahma, he went to Vrindavan to give pleasure to Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj and other intimate friends and devotees for 11 years. Then he would return to kill Kamsa. Because Kamsa did not know this, he believed Yogamaya's statement that Krishna was born elsewhere, not of Devaki. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.4.29 purport.
So the devotees are very tricky. The Yogamaya, she had her reason for misleading Kamsa. She wanted Kamsa to believe that his killer was born elsewhere. Actually, he was born elsewhere, because according to the Acharyas and according to Sukadeva Goswami, he's the elder brother of Yogamaya. So they prove, the Acharyas prove, that Krishna was born as Yashoda's son. So he was born elsewhere in that respect. But she was misleading him, because she actually didn't want Kamsa to understand that Krishna was going to be performing his Leela in Braj. She wanted that to be covered. So this Nidra, at the time of sleep, there's darkness. We can't see things properly. So this Durga Devi, or now in the form of Yogamaya, she's covering Kamsa's vision, so he won't be able to understand actually where Krishna is residing, and so that then Krishna can perform his pleasure pastimes without Kamsa's interference. I think we'll stop here. It's 6:30 now, we'll stop.
This comes in my mind that, that Kamsa was Jaya. So why
He was what?
Jaya originally?
No.
No,
He is Kalanimi.
no, he's Kalanimi. Jai and Vijay are Dantabakra and Shishupal.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a... Devotees don't understand that. Kamsa was Kalanimi, who was in the line of Hiranyakashipu. He's not Jai and Vijay. Yeah.
Okay, then I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
What you're talking about.
Right. Jai and Vijay or Jaghai and Madhai.